I want to talk about why it's not a good idea to live with a woman who you're in a long-term relationship with. I've had the question asked of me before, would I ever get married again? And again, I'll talk about that more towards the end. There's a full video that I've done in that, which I'll link. And that usually follows up with, well, would you ever live with a woman again? And I think, the answer to that is pretty much the same. And I'll explain why. There's three main reasons why it's not a good idea to live with a woman that you actually care about and love and are in a long-term relationship with. I think there's a number of different reasons why it's detrimental and somewhat risky. And there's more than three, but I'm going to deal with the top three in this video. So here's number one. So the very first reason is that, generally speaking, competition anxiety, genuine burning desire, as I describe it in chapter 3 of my book, will decline. I invite you to take a look around at the people in your life that are married, that are in long-term relationships, that are living together, a combination of any of those things. And I want you to, if you want to go through the exercise anyway, just jot down, are they happy or not? It should be reasonably obvious to you if you've known somebody or a couple for quite a few years, whether or not they're happy or they're unhappy with one another. They make it very obvious when you're at social gatherings, at Thanksgiving, birthdays, things like that, whether or not they are in love or obsessed with one another, like in a state of bliss, in a state of love. And they've done studies on this, and I've talked about this before on my channel. Over the course of about 8 odd years, less than 12% of people that are together are still identifying as in love. Less than 3% say that they're in a state of bliss, like they're obsessed with one another. So the chances of you being happily together with a woman over a long-term basis is quite low. And I think one of the reasons for that is that men and women, more specifically brought on by women, sometimes by men because they might not be financially secure and they think it's a good idea to share living expenses and to commingle things, start living together. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't know a lot of people that live together, that are in long-term relationships, marriages, however you want to define it, that are in a state of happiness even with one another. Most of them are pretty annoyed. Most of them are in some cases disgusted or have been disgusted by the other person. And I've said this before in prior videos, disgust is basically the countdown to the end of a relationship. If she ever exhibits distaste, disgust for you, for anything that you're doing or have done, that's never a good sign. It never really happens in long-term relationships where there's a healthy connection, there's a healthy bond, where there's a healthy level of respect. It only happens when it's counting down towards the end of the relationship. And one of the contributing factors to the countdown of a relationship, to the end of it anyway, seems to be living together. So that is the main reason why I don't think it's a good idea to do it. I see certain scenarios where it would be a good idea, like if you're going to raise children, for example. And even then, I've seen lots of people where it's like, I'll take care of the bills and everything. You just live over there with the baby and, like I'll come around and visit. There's lots of guys that do that too, right? Where they don't even live with their kid's mom or their wife, whatever, the setup happens to be. And they seem to be reasonably happy. It's just when you put a man and a woman under the same roof, in the same household, in the same space, you start getting on each other's toes. You leave something out that they don't like. You put something somewhere that they don't like. You start hearing a little bit of chirping about it. Hey, Rich, I cleaned or I organized this cupboard. Why can't you put things back where I told you to? This stuff will start to happen. And it happens on a more frequent basis. It happens on an escalating basis. And it creates a level of distaste for one another. Some people would argue, oh, well, if you just find the right person or you have the same value system, it's impossible. You'll never find somebody else with identical values to you. Unless you can clone yourself. And, while you're at cloning them, you turn them into a female, obviously, if, you're straight. But it's almost impossible for you to find somebody that shares identical values to you. So there's always going to be distinct and distinguished differences. We also live in a world today, by the way, where, we've been told for decades now, men and women are the same, you're equal. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We don't use the terms boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives. You hear a lot of people use the term like partner. And, this notion of an equal partnership where we're all the same, I think is incredibly destructive and incredibly bad for long-term relationships, because there's nobody that's leading anymore. There's nobody taking the lead. There's nobody taking ownership and having authority. And when you have two drivers in the driver's seat, bad shit starts to happen. It's just the way that it is. It's just the way that it's always been. And it will continue to be that way. And it's like, in frankness, And in all honesty, it's a surprise to me anyway, that people take a look around at their family and friends and relatives and they think to themselves, oh, they're not having a good time. They really don't like each other that much. They don't bang that much. Let's go do the exact same thing that they're doing. I've said this many times before. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The vast majority of people that live together end up in a situation or an environment or a feeling where it's not working out for them. You know, like they're confined. I feel like you're on my toes all the time. I'm incarcerated. I can't do this, or I'm walking on eggshells. You know, anybody that's been in a live-in long-term relationship has heard some version of that, or they know somebody that has heard some version of that. So that is the main reason why I don't like the notion of living with a woman. So chapter 3 in my book is genuine burning desire. And that's something that you'll have, or you should have, early on in the relationship. You know, she should express a strong desire for you. This is when, you know, like in the first little while of dating where you're not living together, you have separate places that you're staying at. You've got your thing, she's got her thing, you've got your extracurriculars, she's got her extracurriculars, whatever that happens to look like and be, you sort of like live your own lives. And that's just the way that, you know, that it is. And that tends to work out very, very well, you know, surprisingly. Surprise, shocking, right? You know, you have time apart. But the more time you spend together, the more you become familiar with the other person, the more, you know where they're at all the time. She knows where you're at all the time. She's not worried about you or other, gals looking at you. She's got her thumb on the pulse of your life, right? When you start spending more and more time together. And that becomes boring. Women get bored of familiarity. If you take a woman to the same place over and over again, she will complain about it. Oh, like, dude, you could own a private jet and you could have a particular favorite ski resort in the Swiss Alps, for example. And if you take a chick to your favorite location or your favorite event in your private jet, driving up the mountain in your expensive, four-wheel drive SUV, costs you a few $100,000, eventually she'll say, this is boring. Why do we keep doing the same shit over and over again? Because it becomes too familiar. And that is the real issue when it comes to living together. It's like she knows where you're all the time. You know what your lives are all about. And it just becomes boring and comfortable and way too familiar. And that's not good for a long-term relationship. That's not good for genuine burning desire. And it's certainly not good for love. It's not good for the long term of any kind of relationship whatsoever. It is detrimental. And in my opinion, it is the countdown to the end of it. So there's that. Doesn't happen in all scenarios, but on a balance of probabilities in a vast majority of cases, because we know over 8 years, less than 3% of people are still in a state of bliss. Most people are in a state of bliss at the get-go, at the kickoff, when she chooses you. So just keep that in mind, because some people will argue, they'll be in the comments right now, well, that's not true, I've been with my spouse, blah, 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 blah. It's like, cool, awesome story. Send me an email, and I'd love to have a long conversation with you on one of my podcasts about how you manage to maintain genuine and burning desire for 10 years plus. I'd love to have that conversation and put that on my podcast. The second thing, there's legal consequences. There's legal issues to contemplate. In most parts of the Western world, not all, when you live together with somebody for a prescribed period of time, let's just put it that way, that the law says is common law, you're essentially married. Even though you don't take vows, even though you don't sign a marriage contract, none of those things, the government will look at your living situation as a marriage. Now, you don't even have to live with a chick to be viewed as a marriage. There's a popular case that I covered on my channel a long time ago. There was a Canadian billionaire that was dating this woman for a number of years. They never lived together. They kept separate households. They were both divorced. They had kids, but they would, have dinner together. And they started to live in a way that looked like marriage, that looked like living together. And that came back and that bit him in the ass. He ended up having to pay her something like $50,000 a month in alimony because the judge awarded it to her. So you even have to be careful in that regard in some cases, depending on where you live and how you structure your life and your dating. But you have to understand that the more time you spend with a woman in a way that might look like marriage or be interpreted as a marriage may be viewed as, by the state, by the government, as a marriage. And as such, when things get boring for her, and you probably at some point, you're going to want to end it. And when you end things and you remove access to certain stuff, she may change her tune and her mind about how she feels about you. At one time, she might have been all, oh, I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you. Everything's fine. I'm a strong, independent woman. Look at all my degrees, framed in mahogany. Everything is awesome. But when you end it, and you know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Let's say you end it because there's a prettier, more beautiful, more accessible woman that wants to, you know, be a part of your life. She finds out about it. All of a sudden, even if you weren't married, she might take this before a judge and be like, well, I'm pissed off now, so I want this, that, and the other thing. So there's that to contemplate as well. The legal consequences of living in a way that looks like marriage to the state is problematic. Make sure you check with a lawyer where you live, ask the questions that need to be asked. If you are hell-bent on doing it, by all means, you know, you've been warned, you've watched this video now, at least get some kind of protective mechanism, a cohabitation agreement. If you're living in a way that looks like marriage that needs a prenup, get a prenup, whatever that happens to be. But the smartest people that I know that have the best relationships or have had the best relationships happen to be, wait for it, divorce lawyers. And the way they structure their life is they date, they'll get into a long-term relationship, they'll be monogamous, you know, she wants to claim him, doesn't want to share him, you know, other guys are invisible, fine, but they'll never live with the chick. And they do this, and this is not one, this is several guys that I know that practice family law. They do this because they know that it eliminates completely, without any question of a doubt, that there's going to be any issues in the future of her trying to claim for alimony or even child support. I mean, you could invite a woman with kids into your house and decide to live with her, and she could claim child support. She could legitimately go before a family court and say, well, you know, he doesn't have a dad around, but, you know, Rich over here basically acted like a father for the last 4.5 years. And even though we're not together anymore, he was taking care of things. You know, he was paying bills. He was dealing with the extracurriculars and stuff like that. So judges routinely award child support to moms from men that aren't even the frickin' father. You know, this is just a guy that she dated, was banging for a few years and living in his house. So there's lots of things to contemplate. So thinking that living together will improve things. And this is where guys go really, really wrong. Like, I've seen guys make these requests before over and over again. Well, they say things like, you know, I'm thinking about living with this gal, or I've been living with this gal for a certain period of time, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. But things didn't really get better. They just got worse. They got really worse. You know, when we moved in together, sex stopped happening, or it happened with a frequency that's much less than what I expected, with much less enthusiasm, blah, blah, blah. So look, if you want genuine burning desire, and if you want to minimize legal exposure, legal risk, it's ideal not to live with her. And the third and final point, which will conclude this video, is of course the betatization through 1,000 concessions, the pussification of the male, whatever it is that you want to call it. Women, not intentionally, I want to make this very, very clear, because people get upset when I say this. Women will betatize men. And this is how it happens, for clarity. Again, they don't do this on purpose. They're not trying to make you unattractive. They're not intentionally trying to make you a pussy, you know, or anything related to that. But what they're doing is they're performing these competency tests. They just want to know that you are the absolute best that they can get and be with, and they sort of kind of shit test you, as it's called, right? And it might be something like, Rich, don't brush your teeth over there. You're going to get toothpaste on the carpet. Rich, can you make sure you put the white socks in the white hamper and the dark socks in the dark hamper? You can't leave them on the floor. Rich, you get the point. And you lived in a way that was comfortable for yourself. Like, I have my way, like, I'm set in my ways, man. Like, I've been, you know, I've dated, I've lived with girlfriends, I've lived with a wife, I've dated LTRs, all this sort of stuff. And I'm at the point where it's like, I know when my cleaning lady comes over, I know what she's doing, I know where everything is. Yeah, maybe it's not the layout that a woman would like, but women always like to try to improve. I'm going to do that in quotations. They always like to try to, you know, lay things out differently in a more organized fashion. You know, women on a balance of probabilities have more OCD than men, and they're very particular about the way things are done or laid out, or where they're placed, or where they're returned, and how, and and all these sorts of things. So because of that, they're going to try to impose these beliefs on you. Rich, white socks, white hamper, dark socks, dark hamper. And you start saying yes to all of these things. There's a famous scene from a stand-up comic. I can't remember the name for the life of me, but he's talking about giving her a yes stamp. You're like, yes, 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 yes. You just keep stamping all of these things yes. And the truth of the matter is, when you start doing that and you agree to all of these things over and over and over again, you become very, very unattractive in her eyes. All right, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed that clip. If you want to check out the full-length podcast episode, you can find that right over here. Also, make sure you visit my website over here, where you'll find my supplements, the opportunity to book me privately one-on-one for coaching, and most importantly, my new School of Unplugging, which you'll find on the courses tab. Newer to the channel, hit subscribe.